Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this very special Buddhist Marquee event with Tergar International. And today we're delighted to have Jigme Rinpoche with us, teaching on pure perception, recognizing your enlightened nature. He's going to be in conversation with our executive director, Cortland Dahl. So I'm Jenny. I'm your Tergar host for today and part of the Tergar staff team, along with my colleagues behind the scenes and translators. We're very happy to be here with you today. So before I hand over to Cortland, who's going to introduce Rinpoche, I just want to go through some of the online features with you all. So you can let us know where you're calling in from in the chat, either on Zoom or YouTube. And if you're listening to the recording, we welcome you too. So Jiva is going to just show the QR code because after Rinpoche and Cortland have had a chat, there is going to be a small amount of time for question and answer. So Jiva, are you going to share the slide with the QR code? Maybe not. So there it is, so that you can hold your phone up against that, or on the chat, you'll see a link to that as well, and we'll post that throughout the session. So you can, if you keep your questions short, we've only got a small time for that. And I can see Rinpoche and Cortland on screen already, so welcome. Just a little bit more from me. So we've got over 4,000 people registered for this event and translated into 6 languages if you're on Zoom. So Jiva's going to, if you are on Zoom and you're listening in, Jiva's going to share a slide, a poll, a poll, and you can just let us know which language you're. So if you're on YouTube, you won't see this, so that you can carry on just letting us know where you're calling in from in the chat. Okay. I've got a wide range of people. So let me see. So Chinese, we've got 104 people in Chinese, 13 Russian, 11% of Spanish. We've got a large French community and German and Portuguese. So welcome. You can see that. So thank you, Jiva. And so if you are listening to translation, Jiva is going to show the slides that shows you how that you can access that. And if you're familiar with it, it's if you've got a laptop, it's on the bottom part and you can hover over the interpretation. Someone's saying the translation balloon is not displayed in the app. So if you have a look at your screen there, you'll be able to see the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. And then also click on the 3 dots if you've got a mobile view. So I think that's it. So it is now my great pleasure to hand over to Cortland Dahl, who will introduce you to Rinpoche. Thank you, Cort.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and what an honor to be here with you, Rinpoche. Thank you so much for joining us, and for those of you all over the world for joining. I can see many of you in the chat. We have people everywhere from Brazil to China and everywhere in between. So amazing to have such a great turnout for this. And it's, as I said, a tremendous honor to be in conversation with you, Rinpoche, and to say a few words of introduction. Many of you, I imagine, are familiar with Rinpoche, but for those of you who might be meeting and seeing Rinpoche for the first time, he holds one of the most important lineages in Tibetan Buddhism, the Khyentse lineage that goes all the way back to Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, one of the towering figures of Tibetan Buddhism over the past few hundred years. And in this life, he has been trained by Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who we'll hopefully hear a bit about, and also his father. He was born into a really illustrious family of Buddhist practitioners. His father was Kangyur Rinpoche, another towering master of 20th century Tibetan Buddhism. And for those of you who are in the Tergar community, this is actually the previous incarnation of Mingyur Rinpoche. So there's an incredible connection here between Mingyur Rinpoche and Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche. And he has had a really an amazing influence on Buddhism in the modern world. He, of course, leads retreats and teaches the traditions that he holds in Europe, especially in France, but really all over the world. And he has also been very involved in translation. So he's one of the guides and provides a lot of guidance and support for the Padmakara Translation Committee. If you are reading a lot of the great translations that have come out over the past few decades, you've probably read some of their important works. And also the Khyentse Vision Project, which is translating all of the works of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, who I mentioned a few moments ago. So whether it's through teaching, through translation, or through simply preserving this ancient lineage and making sure it will be continue to be available in the modern world and for coming generations has just provided a tremendous service to the Dharma. So Khyentse Rinpoche, so honored to have you with us. And before we dive in, I have a long list of questions I am eager to ask, but just want to open the floor to you if there's anything you'd like to share here at the outset.
Thank you. So I'm very, very honored to be part of one of the persons who's going to be here on Tergar, because as you mentioned, that Mingyur Rinpoche was one of my father's reincarnation. It's not me who's saying it is. It's one of my teachers, that Gyaltsab Khyentse Rinpoche, who kindly let us know that Mingyur Rinpoche was. And of course, not only that, with all of Mingyur Rinpoche's qualities, Mingyur Rinpoche's how he grew up, how he went out and practiced and taught, very much in tune with how my father grew up. And then once he became the Kempo of Rinpoche Monastery, after his teacher passed away, then Kangyur Rinpoche also disappeared for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And all of that really makes me feel that I'm so fortunate to have be my father in my past life, and in this life, have Mingyur Rinpoche in my life. So I'm really, really feeling honored and very, very inspired by Rinpoche's example, not only in how he lives his life, how he practices, but also how he so graciously makes the Dhamma available to all of us. So first of all, thank you to Mingyur Rinpoche, but also all of you who are part of Rinpoche's activities. So thank you very much. And then you kindly said that I was responsible for Padmakara and Khyentse Vision, etc. For all of those, I am nothing but a wallfly who happens to be on that wall. At best, I might have provided occasionally some emotional, presence. Other than that, everyone working with Padmakara, with all our organizations, and also Khyentse Vision, the people who are working in it are the ones who are really responsible for it. I'm nothing but a wallfly who sort of happens to have landed on that wall. So thank you very much anyway for attributing those really illustrious activities somehow to me.
Well, thank you, Rinpoche. So you mentioned your father, and I wanted to start there with your upbringing, because most of us, I imagine most people listening, not everybody, but a lot of those listening, we probably encountered Buddhism and meditation later in life. I myself started meditating when I was 19 as a college student. And I can't even imagine what it would have been like to grow up in a family of meditators, much less a family of amazing realized masters. So I wonder if you could just share anything, what it was like being born into a family where your father and I imagine your mother, of course, a great practitioner. What was it like? I mean, what do you remember from your early years? Is there anything that stands out as something that kind of shaped your life of kind of growing up with a great teacher?
I would like to say that there's a lot, but uh, just being in an environment like that. Imagine somebody from Mars came to this Earth and said, you're so fortunate. The Buddha Shakyamuni appeared here. How was it like to have the Buddha Shakyamuni in your world? I think a majority of the world would say, who was it? Who is
Yeah.
he? What did he do? You know, my, of course, I feel so fortunate to have had, first of all, Ganjuru Rinpoche as my father. And of course, if those of you who don't know, he was a direct student of somebody called Jedung Rinpoche. His Terton name was Karma Mait, sorry, not Terton, his name was Trinle Chambanjone, also often known as Karma Maitrikara. He was a treasure revealer, and he was a direct student of Jamye Khyentse Wangpo, and also of Jamgo Kongdru Rinpoche. So when I look back in that sense, then I think I should be much more than what I feel now. First of all, as I was born, I think I'm very, very a mediocre child who was born in a really, really beautiful and illustrious and sacred environment. I suppose nothing more than a weed. But what I do remember, like a weed in how can we say, in one of those sacred orchards. I suppose, if it was, what is it, according to the Bible story, what is it, the Garden of Eden? I might be one of the leaves of that apple. But other than that, I can't say much more. But what I can say is that Ganjuru Rinpoche was such a compassionate teacher, compassionate person. I remember every every so often, almost every week, he used to get patients coming to see him because he was a Tibetan doctor. And sometimes people would come in the daytime, but sometimes they would come in the morning, early morning, like 3 or 4, sometimes 1 or 2 at night. And when they came, he wouldn't really sit there, linger, look at his watch and say, at this hour, this late, why, where, just get up and go. And while I was with Ganjuru Rinpoche, I didn't really think much. I thought this was normal. And later, a long time later, once I got to Europe, I realized that that was actually something extraordinary. It wasn't every once in a while. It was almost a weekly occurrence. And he didn't, one thing that I can say is that when I got to Europe, then I started to appreciate his qualities so much more. I never heard from him, me time, I need to rest. It was as if it was sort of the most natural thing. Sometimes people would come to him, they would complain to him. Well, I suppose they would tell him how much they were suffering. And very often I used to feel a little bit uneasy because it felt like he was almost in more pain than those who came to see him. There was one occasion, this person, he was a good practitioner, and he would come to see Ganjuru Rinpoche quite often. Actually, in those times, this kind of person was, I think, it was like the daily news. They would come to Ganjuru Rinpoche and come and tell him the everyday gossip. And this used to also happen with Gyaltsen Rinpoche. People who were living around, they would come and tell them the news. So one day this guy came to Khyentse Rinpoche, and he had done some practice. He had received many teachings from many teachers. And they were, sitting there, and he was crying because he was, I think, in his 50s, and he had a wife, I think about 20 years younger than him. And one day he came to see Khyentse Rinpoche, and he was crying. And when Rinpoche asked him what was up, he said his wife dumped him for somebody, for what is called, what can we say, a younger model. So he was in tears, sobbing, and Khyentse Rinpoche was consoling him for about half an hour. He was consoling him and looked almost as sad as him. Then all of a sudden, Khyentse Rinpoche burst out laughing. So much that this guy also had to stop crying, and he laughed. Because this guy had done long practices, and Khyentse Rinpoche was almost sort of showing him the humor of it. So this is what a kind of a human being Khyentse Rinpoche was. Now, from the Dharma point of view, I think it is beyond me, because also he was a treasure revealer. And I saw him at night. At that time, I used to sleep in the same bedroom as Khyentse Rinpoche. And once Khyentse Rinpoche came there, and in two different rooms, but the rooms were adjacent, and the doors, they used to leave the door open, and then they would be talking. And sometimes when they were talking about daily life, or sometimes the teachings that they had received, sometimes the visions that they had had. But then sometimes it looked like they were talking about what happened in the 9th century, like it had happened yesterday. So they had that kind of access to a completely different dimension that we usually don't have. So in terms of realization, in terms of wisdom, it's, I think, something really that I cannot attempt to talk about, apart from the fact that one student of Khyentse Rinpoche, when somebody asked him how it was to have Khyentse Rinpoche as a teacher, and also asked him, can you compare him to this teacher that we know together? I think somebody who was teaching them some basic Buddhist teachings. And then he told this person that this person's teacher was the loveliest person he had ever met. But that he said having Khyentse Rinpoche as his teacher was having love.
Mm.
So that's really what Khyentse Rinpoche was like.
That's so beautiful. So beautiful. And to imagine seeing the two of them, Dogo Khyentse Rinpoche and Kyabje Khyentse Rinpoche, talking casually like that. I can't even
Yeah,
imagine how.
exactly. And they both shared many treasured texts together. Most of the treasure texts that Khyentse Rinpoche had discovered had Kyabje Khyentse Rinpoche as the holder of the tradition, and then they shared it completely.
No. And at what point in your relationship with your father did you actually start doing practice? At what point did he start instructing you? Was that very early, or did that come
And
many?
the way the Khyentse Rinpoche instructed me to practicing wasn't very, I would say these days, not very structured and normal as we would think these days how studying should be. For example, how he introduced me to Guru Rinpoche. He had the statue of Guru Rinpoche. He would look at it every morning. I would look at it too. And he would tell me, look at Guru Rinpoche. How is he today? And I would see his expression. I would say, oh, today he looks a bit serious. And sometimes it did look serious. Sometimes the statue looked like it was smiling, beaming a smile. I would tell that to Rinpoche. And then, so that's how he introduced me to having devotion, to having Guru Rinpoche as part of my life. He didn't label it as such, saying you have to have devotion to Guru Rinpoche. But he made Guru Rinpoche become so naturally a part of my life. And then every morning he used to do my morning sadhanas for me in a certain way. I remember one morning I woke up, was slightly awake, it was usually around 5 or 5:30, and I heard him chanting. He was chanting the Manjushri sadhana. And slowly I sort of got used to it. And then when he was chanting, I would also sort of follow it because after a couple of months, I also, can I say, memorized it. And then one day, he got me to sort of, he, after I had memorized and gotten accustomed to it, then he told me, chant together. So every morning, I think since I was about, I don't know, 7, then we would do that practice in that way. So most of the introduction to the Dhamma was just like that. It was like it's part of life, just in the same way as I didn't need to be told that is the sun, look at it. He didn't say the sun is your life, part of your life, air is part of your life. In that way, I think he introduced me to all of those. And then, of course, eventually afterwards, he would give us, empowerments and instructions and teachings. But that's how he started with us.
And did you do what many would consider more basic meditation practices? I think many people in the 21st century these days, you download an app or you read a book. Many people start with something like mindful breathing and these things like this. So what people think of as meditation, it sounds like very different than the kind of meditation and the kind of practice that you did from as your entry point into the Dharma. Is that true?
Yes, well, he didn't label it as such. He didn't say you have to be mindful, but that it was understood that as a basic human being, mindfulness is necessary. Just like these days, you don't have to tell kids, download an app. You don't have to plead them. Most of the time, you know, having an app. For example, for us who are used to the modern amenities, if you have a house, an attached bathroom and toilet is something that is part of it. You don't have to say, I need to make sure that my house needs running water and a toilet that flushes. That is how I understood from at least when I was growing up, that he didn't specifically say, sit up, do this, do that. It was understood. I noticed that once I got to Europe, and then I went to India and Nepal. Guess what is the first worry I had when I got back to India or Asia? I'm telling all of you in the audience, just guess. I'm going to give you 3 seconds. What do you think is that I was worried about? It was, is there a toilet? Is there water? Is there a bathroom? And I never thought of it when I was in India. When I was growing up, I used to travel with my father, and that was not number one, not even the 100th. It was sort of understood. That's how I grew up with. And of course, those practices were later on something that I understood and something that I actually put in practice. But as I was growing up, these were the most natural things. If you see a weed, you just know you need to pluck it. It wasn't made into something that, I'm not so sure if I can say this correctly, but in our modern society, we're so advanced. At the same time, we're losing the most basic things in such a way that they have to be taught, spelt, almost sort of drilled into us. These were sort of natural things.
And did it's beautiful to hear what you saw in your father's presence because it's maybe a little different than what many of us who might be encountering meditation or even Buddhism for the first time might think about, where we think about suffering and training the mind and mindfulness. And the first thing that came across to me as you were speaking about your father and your upbringing was love, was compassion and devotion. Um, Not so much as a practice, like you have to sit down and do this and do that, but just seeing it, seeing how your father embodied that. Is that, yeah, how did that start to come to you? Was it just something that just became sort of this is just natural in terms of how to be human, or did it dawn on you that this is a practice? This is something you
No,
actually need to cultivate?
it didn't dawn onto me as it was a practice. It was just part of life.
Hmm.
Um, I think most of you are probably used to watching uh, advertising in the US. When you watch anything on television, you have advertising, and most of the advertising is about pharmaceuticals. And most of that pharmaceutical what do you call it? Advertising is about the side effects of that particular drug. Which, for example, if it is for mental illness, it says it could make you suicidal, it could kill you, it could do this, do this, do this. But at the same time, imagine the amount of people who will buy it.
Hmm.
That is part of life in our modern life. I'm not so sure this is a good example, but for me, it was that with Kanjuro Rinpoche. The first time I saw a corpse, because sometimes people used to bring their that person, sometimes Kanjuro Rinpoche used to visit. But once I saw this procession, funeral procession, and everyone else was telling me, oh, that person had died. What's quite interesting is I never wondered to ask, what is death? It was just normal. Oh, that is a corpse. That is death. And I used to also, because of some of the people around me, they would say, "Oh, that's a dead body. Don't go close," etc. Frighten me. And I used to tell Kanjuro Rinpoche, "Oh, I don't want to look because it's frightening." He said, "What's so frightening?" He said, "Everybody dies." There wasn't this cosseting thing of, oh, little child should be protected from experiences of life so that when you become old, you won't be able to deal with life. That was something that Kanjuro Rinpoche never did. Sort of directly introduce you, or he did not protect me from reality.
Hmm.
And that, I think, is one of the things that I miss most as I'm growing in this modern society. All of us are protected from reality. So that, we have to keep constantly covering up, patching up our deluded world.
And what about, it's I could see if you grow up feeling loved, feeling this unconditional love and feeling like there's somebody there that's just like the sun. They're just there all the time. The light, the warmth of their love is there all the time. And therefore you feel safe, you feel protected. And many people don't feel that. I think many people in this world didn't have that and don't feel that. And so the world is a scary place. And there's something that, you can learn and you can cognitively understand, but there's also something that's just sort of when you grow up a certain way. For example, if you don't grow up like that, there's almost like a deeper, even deeper than emotional. It's like existentially we feel vulnerable or unprotected. So how, if we didn't grow up with that, how can we get in touch with that sense of feeling safe and loved and cared for, just so we don't feel we need to protect ourselves all the time, as you're saying?
Well, I don't feel that I'm fearless. The world around is terrifying. And I don't feel that, I don't feel foolish enough to feel that I can just run around. I do feel that the way I had that fortune was has prepared me to see the world, to accept the world, accept reality as it is. So, and of course, there's another thing that Khyentse Rinpoche did, and also a long time later on, my mother did. It was that, for example, Khyentse Rinpoche, about 2 years, and mainly about a year before he passed away, he used to sort of tell me about about him going away. And I would say, "Oh, where are you going to go?" He would say, "Oh, I'm going to go and see Guru Rinpoche." Again, it almost felt like, oh, there is a place called, Guru Rinpoche's place. He's going to go. It really felt like, it didn't feel like he was going to be completely inaccessible. And then slowly, as he said that, I could feel a little kind of anxiety or sadness. But at the same time, it didn't feel like it was something that, one could stop it. But of course, I would tell him, no, don't go. I want you to stay.
Mm.
He prepared me and of course others in that way. That and again, every time he said that, he would say, think of me and think of Guru Rinpoche as inseparable. And he would continuously say, whenever you need any help, just do that and I'll be there. I
Mm.
grew up with that kind of childish belief, but at the same time, even now, I don't feel that the world is, what can we say, all pink and rosy. But at the same time, I don't feel completely let down. So uh, when us, when people who don't have that kind of environment, of course, there is a point where we're always looking for help. We would like somebody to, what do you call it, cuddle us, hold us. At the same time, there's a certain cynicism that we have developed. And at the same time, there's a certain kind of complaint thinking, why me? Why not me? Why did it have to wait all of this time? If we can, I feel in my case, if I can sort of remove that kind of, what is it called, chatter on the radio, and if I'm able to open to, as a Buddhist, of course, to the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and whoever else is able to help us, then I think it's not impossible to find a doorway out of it. But that doorway is so much part of our, in one sense, it's our survival instinct to protect ourselves. Just like somebody, for example, who's lost a dear friend, whether they have broken up. For example, some people, when they're broken up with each other, then they feel that whoever that person is that dumped them is really like the world letting them go, and they feel that they can never open their heart, etc., until they can. But what makes them do that is that they have to have a certain openness, certain vulnerability. We need to be able to appreciate that vulnerability because we have been so trained into thinking that vulnerability is actually dangerous. But it is so beautiful, that ability to not be suspicious all the time. If we can have that, well, then there's definitely a possibility. That is sort of a gateway to, to having some confidence. I hope this makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It just reminds me, I mean, one of the topics for our discussion today is the idea of pure perception. And I think what you're pointing to is just in the modern world, I mean, the human condition in general, but even more so in this current 21st century version of being human, we just have such a deeply ingrained habit of seeing ourselves as being broken.
Yes.
And we're so fixated on our own problems and shortcomings, on all the problems of the world, and it becomes almost like an addiction. Like we just see everything that's wrong and we can't see the beauty. We become almost blind to it. And going back to your upbringing with your father, I mean, I'm guessing that maybe the word pure perception was not said, but part of it is how if you have somebody in your life that sees you that way, that not that they diminish, I'm
Mm.
sure at times a naughty kid and did the stuff
Oh,
kids do, but somebody who just sees the best in you. And I think of this with Mingyur Rinpoche, with as one of his students, just having somebody in my life who, even when I don't see it myself, can see the best in me and can see the potential. And how hard it is when we don't feel that. And I'm just wondering at a more practical level, in a world that feels so broken, and in a world where we feel so pulled into this way of seeing ourselves and seeing situations, how can we get back to that sense of pure perception without ignoring the real problems that do exist in the world? Because you don't want to go to the other side where it's like we're sort of pretending everything's great and we ignore climate change or whatever we think the big problems of the world are that do need our attention. So I don't know. It's like a hard to balance those two.
well, I don't know how we have learned this, but we have learned so well how to cocoon ourselves. Of course, it's natural that we want to protect ourselves, but we have learned so well to protect ourselves that, at least in my case, I feel that I have learned to close all the doors and not have any way of coming out. Uh, when, especially with the pandemic, all of us were so protective of each other and wearing masks and not seeing people, which is, of course, you know, reasonable, natural, and we did it, it was good. But there is a part of it, like when we travel to some countries, most of us would like to travel there with in an air-conditioned car, air-conditioned hotel room, go and eat something with which is sort of spiced with hand sanitizers and masks. I actually recently went to India, and I felt that actually I was in my own prison, where India couldn't, I couldn't allow India to connect with me. That is something that I had learned. I think it's just part of my own insecurity. And I think we have to sort of, I feel that I have to learn to unlearn, or rather to open up my insecurities. And I think of course, I should allow it to protect me, but also allow myself to be fearless in questioning my protecting mechanisms, whether the protecting mechanisms that I have need another protection that mechanism, another protection around it, or am I courageous enough to question it, not question it in a bad sense, but see its needs or the veracity of it. I think at least that is what I have come up with for myself so that I don't completely seal and lock myself in that. And I'm not saying that this will sort of bring us tremendous enlightenment and realization, but starting to question my pure perception of my protection mechanism.
Hmm.
This is not to say that I'm against it, but I think entitled to and I need to question it. Otherwise, it is really like not having any kind of, what is it called? Free speech. Here, it has become free thought is not allowed because this is something that I have thought of as my protection mechanism.
Yeah, I can see that, in the US, as I'm sure you know, Rinpoche, we've lived through this space, this period where you hear this idea of safety actually has become a huge cultural paradigm. Like we need to be in protection mode. So we
Yes.
saw it physically and with health with the pandemic, but we do this emotionally. And I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and I'm part of the university here, which is one of the big universities in the US. And exactly what you're saying, you can see how culturally in our relationships, in our families, and even as a society, we have this view that almost if we're good, we should be safe all the time.
Exactly.
And actually, it's if you look at the immune system as just one example of this, actually, if even if you could succeed in protecting yourself from all the pathogens in the world, your immune system becomes very weak and atrophied in that kind of environment. Actually, you need challenges. If it's too intense, you become sick. But if it's too little, your immune system stops to function. So
Yes.
you could view the same thing emotionally, even spiritually. And you can kind of going back to what your father said. I remember that image where he said everybody dies in a
Yes.
moment where as a parent he could have and it would have been natural for him to try to protect you. So if you take that as a from the point of view of how we engage our practice of the Dharma, it seems like what you're saying is part of it is stepping outside of the safe zone, almost intentionally as part like, and again, we probably need to do that with balance, but am I
Yeah,
understanding that right?
that's what I meant. Dharma practice for most of us, I think, in the beginning, it's almost impossible to not see it as a protection mechanism in which I don't have to grow. I don't have to change. I can just be as I am. That is a complete oxymoron because the word Dharma in Tibetan is called Chö. Chö means to modify, to change, to uh, straighten up something. But of course, Dharma in the beginning is impossible to see that. But that's actually normal for most of us. But eventually we'll realize that Dharma practice is something that should make us less dependent on on protection mechanism that way, in such a way that we actually have the resilience to relate to the world rather than protecting ourselves, having a shell. You know, in the animal kingdom, snails have shell. In the human world, those who have some means have, what is it called? This aluminum thing that follows cars, airstream,
Mhm.
caravans. But that's also, an extension of our ability to relate to the world. And I think in the same way, Dharma practice shouldn't be something like that. If it is, then I'm not so sure if the Dharma practice, as I think Jigme Rinpoche coined it so well, spiritual materialism. We
Mm.
can't escape spiritual materialism, but at least it is important that we are using it and that we are addicts of spiritual materialism. Just like for people who are addicts of substance, etc. The first thing is not necessarily stopping, what is it called, cold turkey, but it is actually acknowledging that we are alcoholics or drug addicts. And I think for us, we are all addicts of materialism, spiritual materialism. Well, that's just the same thing. That's just the thing for all of us. We want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. And it is from that sort of, what do you call it, swamp that, you know, a plant like a beautiful lotus has to grow from. So I think it's actually quite an important thing.
Part of this seems to be that we're actually kind of radically changing how we view ourselves. Normally, we view ourselves, whether consciously or unconsciously, as being weak, as being like we kind of can't handle the world.
Yes.
And so I think many of us come to Dharma even like it's going to help us handle the overwhelmingness of the world. And for some reason, this traditional practice of the mandala offering came to mind because one of the things that I learned in this practice, and for those of you who aren't familiar with this, you're kind of just imagining giving everything, like as much as you can possibly imagine. You do this over and over and over and over again. And part of what that taught me is that the giving doesn't deplete me. It actually makes me feel more enriched. And there's some part of us that it's almost doing the opposite of what you think you need. Like we think we need to be safe, and therefore we try to protect ourselves. But then we feel even more unsafe, and we just become more and more sensitive. So it's almost by stepping outside of that, we start to feel, oh, actually, there's something in me that can handle this. But it goes against some programming we have or conditioning we have. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Um, this reminds me of a story that my father told me about a beggar coming to the Buddha to beg. And this beggar apparently came to the Buddha and begged, and he said that the Buddha asked the beggar to tell him, "I don't want, I have enough." And the beggar could not say it. And then eventually when he did it, then the Buddha gave him something. Later on, when he was asked, the Buddha was asked, I think by Ananda, or I don't remember who, and he said, this particular beggar has for countless lifetimes been a beggar because of his beggar mentality, his poverty-stricken mentality. And because of that, he has continued that. And if he hadn't reversed that, he would have continued like that. Often for us, when we think of mandala practice, it feels like we are giving, offering. But at the same time, we don't really know what it is. How is that mandala practice actually benefiting us? It is actually doing exactly what the Buddha did. Told that person to say, I don't need anything. I am fully satisfied. I have everything. It's just changing that, especially in the mandala practice. It isn't about how much material things we possess. It is about the countless, immeasurable abilities of our mind to produce and to offer. Because actually, the mandala practice is not so much what material that we give, it is the ability for the mind to give that.
Mm.
That is what we are accumulating. We can say accumulating, but it's a bad word. We are sort of gathering, or it's sort of really like removing some bugs from our database of our brain, of our consciousness, of our ground consciousness, removing that stickiness, that fearfulness, by actually opening it up, by letting go. I think if we can notice how enjoyable it is to offer, then it's not so much about me giving up things. This is also a big misunderstanding, I think. For example, you know some Tibetan, don't you?
Yes.
How would you translate the word ngenjung into English?
Oh, that's so hard. Well, of course, renunciation is the classic,
Yes.
but I always feel like this is not a literal translation, but I guess in the way I more think about it is it's as much a turning away from as it's turning towards something
Yes.
new. It's we when we hear renunciation, it feels like, oh, we have to give something up. And I feel like it
Exactly.
just puts us in exactly the opposite mentality that
Yes,
it's pointing to.
yes,
But it's hard to capture that in any English word.
yes.
So you
But
just
I
picked
think,
one of the hardest, one of
yes,
the hardest ones to
that
translate.
is why, even though it is very difficult, if we translate it literally, I think it would do more justice to it.
Mhm.
No, literally, it is nge jung. Nge, there's some sense of certainty,
Like yeah.
definiteness. Jung is to extract.
Mm.
There needs to be some kind of uh, uncontrollable and unturnable wish to extract oneself.
Like decisive emergence or something like
Decisive
that.
emergence or decisive extracting oneself.
Yeah,
For
yeah, that's
example,
great.
yeah, if we think of if we were in a war-torn town, we wouldn't say, "Oh, I would like to renounce this place. I would like to be extracted from that place."
Mm. Mm.
So similar to that, what were we talking about before? I forgot now. Um, the
Yeah,
mandala,
we had
making
talked
the
about
mandala.
mandala and how it
Yes,
kind of shifts
the
us.
mandala offering. So similarly, when we use the word offering, um, again, it's so difficult with our English language because most of these words are coming from, of course, the philosophies that have had such an influence on English language. And then when you put Buddhist and Tibetan words to it, we think that we have actually translated it properly, but we're actually sending the wrong message along with it. So offering. Now, what does offering mean to this more modern society where everyone is somewhat Anglophone or have the influence of the English language, Western language? And if you understand that offering, what does it actually mean? That's a question that I think we really need to understand. So, from that point of view, mandala is, um, I think, quite often misunderstood, as well as like Vajrasattva practice. It's really misunderstood in our daily life. For example, the moment we tell somebody you should do Vajrasattva practice, what is the person going to think? They're going to think, oh, it must mean that I have a lot of obscurations, I have a lot of uh, things to cleanse. But actually, it's not, doesn't mean that. So I think in the same way, when we're talking about mandala offering, Guru Yoga, all of that, I think it's so helpful if we uh, can we say, break down the actual meaning and then build one so that we're actually comfortable with understanding it. I'm not saying that we can change the translated words because that's been now set for a long time, so it's very difficult to change that. But in terms of our personal practice, I think we really have to do almost a complete, what do you call it, restructuring of and rewiring of what these things mean to individual practitioners.
This reminds me of some of the challenges I personally encountered, and I think many people do when I first encountered the Tibetan tradition. I'd been doing breath meditation and basic mindfulness practices. And when I first encountered Tibetan Buddhism, there was all this talk about the guru and devotion. Of course, I saw all this imagery, which looked very theistic to me and was very confusing because I just thought, okay, here's this non-theistic tradition, which attracted me to Buddhism. Like I was not, I was thinking, okay, I don't want this very theistic tradition. But then I encountered these things that they felt very theistic. The guru, even the guru idea, it felt like, okay, now I'm just going to be groveling at the feet of some higher being and give away all my power and my independent thinking. And I think a lot of people have the same kind of hang up. And part of it is, of course, just maybe a misunderstanding of what we even mean by guru or how devotion actually functions. And again, it reminds me of your story when you talked about being with your father. And I'd love also to hear about your experience with Dogo Khyentse Rinpoche, another of these incredible masters from last century, where it's not so much at the end of this, they're just like a god and you're there, your confused self, but they're helping you see something in yourself ultimately. So I wonder if you could just speak to a lot of the hangups many people have when they encounter the tradition for the first time.
Um, if I may, for this, when we first encounter these traditions, we have to really see who is encountering these traditions.
Mm.
And then um, what do we need? For example, if you go into the Antarctic, what do we need? If you go into, going to see the mountains of Andes or go to India or going to the Himalayas, what do you need? For most of us, if you go into the Himalayas or India, you're going to have a half a suitcase of antibiotics and anti-nausea, anti-diarrhea. I was traveling to India recently, and somebody who was traveling with me had this big bag of all of these pills. Actually, my suitcase, whenever I travel, half of it is filled with vitamins, etc., etc., etc. Now, that shows that actually, when we are going into those situations, we need some preparedness. We need some to acknowledge that I'm going into that place. So I have to see that in a different light. For example, from the Western point of view, if you encounter a different tradition, how do you see it? For example, I see many people who do research, doctorates on Buddhist ideas and themes. And I notice that many of those people who do that have to sound very, what is it called? It's called, I think, very unbiased.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Does that mean that you actually spent 8 or 9 years studying something that you don't respect? It's almost like saying, I have studied this, but this is not what I'm actually thinking of. This is not. What that suggests is a certain unawareness of your own situation. If you're already so whatever it is, then why even bother about it? That's one thought I have. And then, yes, now, if I am going to grovel in front of a guru, I'm not saying that you should, but I'm just going to do, what is it called? The devil's advocate.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, at this moment, at least until, yeah, maybe I shouldn't say that. At this moment, what do we grovel in front of? If there is a country that is giving you special treatment for taxes, they all grovel, and then all the people with money move to that place. Like in the United States, whichever state doesn't have some, gives you certain things, you grovel. That is groveling, whether you like it or not. Why did that very, very rich person move from California to Texas to build his whatever empire? Because they were groveling in front of whoever was giving them that. Is that groveling? Is that not groveling? I cannot say much more than that. Not only that, in front of any kind of likes that you can get on FaceTime, what is it called? Any social media,
Yeah.
they are definitely groveling. Actually, much more than any in front of any guru that people think they're groveling. So there it's just an idea of an image that we are used to and not used to. And also, when you are in front of something that we really want, do we have that openness? I'm not saying not having a critical mind. What kind of openness do we have? If, for example, if it happens that to become, if we know that actually this could make me free, then am I happy with some kind of theistic images or not? I'm not so sure. What would we do if somebody says that if you go to the US embassy 20 times, sleep at the embassy door, and you'll get a visa. That is what happened in Kathmandu many, many, many years ago. People used to camp in front of the US embassy. But nobody thought that that was groveling, because they knew what they wanted, they knew what they were getting. They knew that they would get economic freedom from wherever they were by going to the US. Is that groveling? If a US student, a citizen is wanting to get out and cannot get into the embassy and screams and shouts and says, "I will do anything you want me to do if you let me in," is that groveling? It really it shows their idea of where they are. If we know the situation where we're in, we will have a different light. For example, for me, I would say that there's few ways of entering the Buddhist path. First, in way of entering the Buddhist path is wanting peace of mind. And what that peace of mind is something not so clear to us, but basically peace of mind. And in order to do that, you need to not make yourself disturbed by this thought, this emotion, that emotion, and you can do that. According to in the Tibetan tradition, we usually call it Hlamitekpa, the path, the vehicle that leads you to a better experience, whether it's in this life or next life. Not all Buddhists like that even are able to comprehend the Four Noble Truths. Not even sure that they want to be aware of it. As long as they engage in the positive causes of their positive result that they want, and they take refuge in the Buddha, it's fine for them. But now when you start thinking of truth of suffering, what does that mean? At that point, how does that relate to my present suffering, present dilemma? So I think also that these are what we have to come to terms with when we have these difficulties. Now, of course, in one sense, one of the problems is that we think that the Buddhist tradition is a religion. Do you think it's a religion? Would you say Buddhism is a religion? Of course, now we are stuck in this world where everything has to be put in this, what do you call it, filing or that filing. But as a Buddhist practitioner, who at least as somebody who appreciates the Buddhist teachings, I am so, it's so difficult for me to say it is a religion. I hear some people say it's not a religion, it is a philosophy of life. I really don't know. I don't know why we don't have another option. The moment you think Buddhism is a religion, we are putting it into a set language, in which case then we would have to start saying that Milarepa is a saint. The moment we put a saint to him, what does it mean? For me, as soon as I say saint, I see a thing on his head, and he's looking quite sort of kind but sad, and then all these songs of Milarepa sort of is not really part of him. And then, as you know, our Tibetan tradition is so desperate to have His Holinesses, His Eminence, His Grace, etc., 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 which is beautiful in a sense. But another sense, then actually, are they under the Pope or not? So these are things that I'm really struggling with. So when you say going into the Buddhist tradition with all of these images, statues, I think one thing is that when Buddhism was finally sort of opened to the West, of course, it shows that in one sense, the Buddhist teachers were not good marketing. Basically, they were not interested in selling. They were just interested in sharing. If they had a marketing director, if they had somebody who would help them present themselves from the very beginning, for example, in the 1959s, things would be completely different. These ideas would never arise. It's almost like saying, oh, there is this image, that image, because each of them have behind them such an explanation for each. For example, many of the deities that we see are just like codes. Some deities, as you know, the Buddhist, especially the Vajrayana Buddhist, especially from Tibet, has so many deities, hundreds and millions of them. Some of them have 100,000 heads, 100,000 arms, etc. Some of them have four, some of them have one head, etc. All of this is just a code. It's really, for me, it's really like seeing the calculations that some of the astronomers have made, and you're going into there and thinking, wow, that's too much numbers. I'm not so sure I'm interested in arithmetics. I'm not so sure I'm interested in mathematics. That is actually what is happening. It's because for somebody who doesn't know numbers, seeing all these, X, Y, Zs, and what is X if, with this, squiggly thing on top, etc., it is very, very difficult. But each of them have a significance behind. So all of these different deities are, as you know, is just the flip side of how to open the caskets of our difficulties so that actually they can be unfolded, opened into the blossoming flower that one can become. But the problem is, as I was saying, we didn't have good marketing. We didn't have good missionaries in Tibetan tradition. And so, for example, some of the missionaries, the proselytizers, are so good. In Nepal, I saw some Tanka paintings, and I thought that was a beautiful Tanka painting. When you got closer, these images actually have deities I've never seen. It's actually beautiful. The the effort they have put into it, so that they can actually adapt to the locals. There's some saints in the center with all the Tanka movements. Something like that. If we had, then I think your question would never arise. But we didn't have that. But in another sense, it's actually beautiful too, because it shows, at least until now, there was no marketing done. Nobody was interested in selling anything. It was just available. Just like, you go into these Indian shops, they sell absolutely everything under the sun. And sometimes in the past, when I got to Europe, I used to feel a little bit looking down at them. But now when I go back, I seek them out. It's so beautiful. Everything is there. You can pick anything from there. At the same time, there doesn't seem to be much marketing trying to sell it to me. So that's also, for example, what I felt when I was with Gyaltsen Khyentse Rinpoche. Gyaltsen Khyentse Rinpoche was, as you know, uh, people called him a Rime teacher. Even this term Rime teacher is also, I think there's some problem in that marketing, because at least in my case, Gyaltsen Khyentse Rinpoche was considered a Rime teacher because of his name.
And could you maybe just mention some people might not be familiar with what Rime means, just for
Yes.
context.
Yes. Well, actually, I don't know really what it means. I'm sure many of you must have heard something called Jigme. Literally, it means uh, unbiased. I would like to think unbiased openness and unbiased care for all traditions. People call it, is it ecumenical movement or something? But I really don't understand it, and I don't really think that I'm sure of what it actually means. But for example, Khyentse is considered a Jigme teacher, but it just means unbiased because Khyentse spent decades going around Tibet looking for any teachings of the Buddha that had come from India and that are still available in Tibet or from Tibetan teachers that were in decline and that were almost getting lost. And I heard that in some instances, there were some people who had received some reading transmission and that person was the only one. And I heard that some of them didn't know how to read, and some of them were almost blind. So he read it, got them to repeat it, and then received that lineage from them. So Khyentse had that kind of care for all traditions, all the 8 different traditions, or as we know it now, the 4 different traditions of the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. He held them like that. And actually, for example, my teachers, like Yajidun Rinpoche, had also received instructions and teachings from many different traditions. Everybody would think that Yajidun Rinpoche was a Nyingma master. But if you look at the list of the teachings that he received from many different traditions. Yajidun Rinpoche was somebody like that. And his care for the different traditions. Of course, according to the text that he actually preserved, like the Damranzu, which is called the Treasury of Instructions, it contains all the 8 traditions in Tibet. And people used to know him as Jigme. People from many different traditions would come and receive teachings from him. And many of them used to felt that actually he was from that tradition. And but actually one anecdote that I want to share is that one day, it was sometime after Solness, the 16th Karmapa, had passed away. I had accompanied Rinpoche to Rumtek for that. And then after the cremation, I came with Gyaltsen Rinpoche to Delhi, and we were staying there for a few days, waiting for his flight to South India. And I was there with Gyaltsen Rinpoche. I think Ramjo Rinpoche had not arrived. So I was there one day in the morning, and we used to visit Gyaltsen Rinpoche every morning. The first thing, we would go there, pay respects, and Rinpoche used to give us some precious pills every morning. And one day as I went there, there was just Rinpoche's attendant and then another Kempo, and 3 of us were there. So I went to see Rinpoche. And I saw Rinpoche sitting down, because Rinpoche didn't talk until 9 o'clock in the morning. He was doing his practice sessions. And then this morning, I saw Rinpoche sobbing, really sobbing, just like a child. And he gave me the pills, so I went away. And then at a few hours afterwards, at 9 o'clock, I went to see Rinpoche. I'm quite curious why Rinpoche was crying so much. And I said, Rinpoche, what's happened? He said, one of the 16th Karmapa's assistant has passed away. And I asked, why didn't you cry like that when the Karmapa passed away? He said, when the Karmapa passed away, all his activities were continued by these students. And I said, this person is very important. When he passes away, all the other activities will be, you know, affected. And he said, that's why I'm sad. I had never seen Rinpoche cry for anything. But there, it was because he was saying the Kagyu tradition, the Karmapa's activities. That I thought is really an example of Rinpoche in the sense that his care, his respect for all tradition was just like that. So that is a Rinpoche tradition. For me, that is Rinpoche tradition. And also, not only Gyaltsen Khyentse Rinpoche, I had received many teachings from Gyaltsen Rinpoche, Gyaltsen Khyentse Rinpoche, and then Gyaltsen Tushik Rinpoche. Actually, just to let you know, one day when we were receiving the Choling Dersa teachings in Nepal, I went into Rinpoche's, into the temple, and Rinpoche said, "Come here." Rinpoche used to eat in the temple, and he was sitting with Gyaltsen Tushik Rinpoche, and he said to me, "This is Gyaltsen Tushik Rinpoche, and you have been entrusted to me by your father." And later on, he said, "He's going to look after you. He will give you teachings." So, okay, I just thought, I hadn't met Gyaltsen Tushik Rinpoche for a long time, and I didn't know him. I don't know if we can say this, it was the first time I'd met him. I'd never heard of him. So anyway, then thanks to that, when Gyaltsen Rinpoche passed away, one day we were coming from Bhutan to Kathmandu, and we were waiting at the airport, and Gyaltsen Rinpoche said, "Come here." And he said, it was just after Rinpoche's cremation, he said, "Don't worry. Do you remember what Gyaltsen Rinpoche said that many years ago?" I had completely forgotten, but he remembered. And then I suddenly remembered. And at that time, I felt that my teachers had actually cared for me. Not only not only did I have to believe it, but I had that proof for me. So this leads me to another anecdote with Gyaltsen Khyentse Rinpoche. One day, again, I was sitting in Rinpoche's room, and I was sitting there, and at that time, although I had tremendous devotion to Gyaltsen Khyentse Rinpoche, I was a bit, what can I say, biased against prayers, reciting. And every day when the teachings would finish, usually it would last long, and teachings were finished, we would do long prayers of aspirations. And I used to complain to some of my friends saying, "Oh, again, those long things." And then when Gyaltsen Tushik Rinpoche used to come, we would have even more aspiration prayers, sometimes 3 times the king of aspirations, etc. And I used to complain a lot. And Rinpoche must have known that. So he said to me, "Do you have devotion to Gyaltsen Tushik Rinpoche?" I said, "Rinpoche, I really don't know him. I've just met him." And I said, "Rinpoche, I don't think I can say I have." And then he said, "Do you have devotion to me?" I said, "Rinpoche, please tell me what devotion is." I said, "Rinpoche, I feel tremendous. I love you really very much. Actually, no different from my own father." And I said to Rinpoche, "Is that devotion?" He said, "That's enough." He said, "That'll do." Do you remember? Have you ever watched this? What is it called? It's a movie called The Pig.
Babe? Is
Babe,
it Babe?
Babe, yes, Babe.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Oh yeah, that'll do. When he
That'll
says
do.
that'll do.
That is exactly how I felt when Rinpoche said,
Yeah,
"That'll
yeah.
do." So that is my first connection with the feeling of what devotion is towards Rinpoche. It was this, how can we say, completely open, nothing held behind, feeling that, whether I, swept to the right, left, up, down, that's all I want. Just be with him. That kind of openness.
That's
So,
so beautiful.
so that's one of the anecdotes with Khyentse Rinpoche. That's how it was being with Rinpoche. For me, there was really no difference between my father, Kangyur Rinpoche, and Khyentse Rinpoche, because, of course, I used to be cuddled very often by my father. And the first thing I missed after he passed away was cuddling and holding his arms. And then just a few days later, Khyentse Rinpoche came into the picture, and Rinpoche was so cuddly. He would cuddle us, he would hold us, and that is the continuity of Khyentse Rinpoche and Kangyur Rinpoche. And then later on, it went to Gyaltsab Rinpoche. And then somehow, even though he didn't do it in an overt manner, it is there that Gyaltsab Rinpoche's, after Rinpoche's passing away, when we were doing the ceremonies, it is there that I met His Holiness Sakyatijin Rinpoche. And that was just, another sort of a seamless continuation of the Guru's kindness.
So beautiful. For those of you who aren't familiar with these names, maybe somebody could just write them in the chat if somebody hasn't already, because we're hearing some of the most amazing figures of the last century of Buddhism. So Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche and Kangyur Rinpoche, Trolshik Rinpoche, and now Sakyatrizin Rinpoche. So if somebody, just in case these names are new to you, I would encourage you just to actually, even if you just Google their names, I know for me, some of my first memories as a Dharma practitioner, somehow I stumbled upon the book Words of My Perfect Teacher. And I checked it out from the library. This is like in 1995 or something. And it was so over my head. I really did not understand anything. But I saw a picture of Dudjom Rinpoche and a picture of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. And I cannot get those pictures out of my head. Like they will be in my mind, hopefully for eternity. Like something of just seeing their pictures. So if these are new names to you, these are just, you know, Buddha's living enlightened masters. So even any connection with them. So Rinpoche, we have a very long list of questions, and unfortunately, we're almost out of time. But I wanted to at least ask a couple, if it's
Yeah.
okay. One is, I'm just curious to hear how you respond. Somebody wrote, please give us some tips to recognize again and again our enlightened nature in daily life.
Just before I answer that, I want to let you know, all of you, that His Holiness Sakyatijin Rinpoche is still on this earth.
Mm,
And those of you who have the opportunity, this is such a rare possibility. Go wherever he is and have a glimpse of his face. I'm not saying that there aren't others, there are so many, but this one is, again, an occasion in a billion that we
mhm,
still have him on this earth. Also, for me, he is no different from all my other teachers. He is, so kind, so gentle, so humble, so easily approachable. So I would like to say this is something that you have to take advantage of while he's still on this earth. If possible, I would like to have made all of you meet Khyentse Rinpoche, Kangyur Rinpoche, Gyaltsab Rinpoche. Oh, another teacher that is I feel so much gratefulness towards. It's Gyaltsab Rinpoche. He was also very, very close to Gyaltsab Rinpoche, and he was so kind. His kindness was so impossible to cover, because he came to France to give us some empowerments. He had terrible back. He would lie down in the empowerment room to rest his back, and then would get up and then prepare. Just to let you know, even at that time, he had his leg amputated, his
mm,
fingers amputated, but he still shone through with such care, kindness. Whenever he used to walk up into the tent to give the teachings, he would greet everyone with this iconic Daishe Dele to everyone. I wish I had those words so that you could hear it. These are teachers who really inspire us, whether we want or not. We can't help but being inspired by them. So your question was, can you remind me?
Yeah, could you please give us some tips to recognize again and again our enlightened nature in daily life?
Okay. So difficult to uh, to talk about enlightened nature because I myself am not enlightened. But what I can say for sure is that I notice what unenlightened is. That one, I have so much reminder of all of those things. And whenever I remember them, those unenlightened natures, I would like to ask you, when you imagine that you had that, you noticed that unenlightened nature, what do you feel if you notice it? Do you feel a little bit uh, down if you notice your unenlightened nature? What do you feel? Your covered nature, what do you feel? That is a question that I'm going to ask you to pose to yourself. Has anybody answered?
I don't know. Let me see if we can. Let me ask the team. Is there anywhere where people can write in the responses? I myself am not seeing the chat. Yeah, I'm not seeing. I can't see the chat here. Oh, here we go. Now I see it.
Yes.
So somebody wrote sadness,
Sadness.
frustrated. Somebody wrote tristesse.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Sadness. Sadness.
fermeture.
Agitation. Anger. Waste. Or that, I don't know. Emotions. So when you feel all of those, we have to understand that our ability to feel those, to be vulnerable to them, to be sensitive to them, that is the door to uncovering them, to what do you call it? Getting over them, to grow out of it. So actually, when we feel those reaction to them, it's actually a really good thing. It's the opening towards that. At this moment, if you start thinking, oh, I want to feel this enlightened state, we're going to be either really disappointed or we're going to feel um, really great about it, feel so good about it that we may think we're actually enlightened. Both of these are undesirable. There is a possibility that you're actually feeling that. That, I think, you need to mingle with your devotion to the Guru so that you don't feel so puffed up about it. But the other two are more likely to happen to most of us. So the first one, feel a little bit bad about it, a little sad about it. It's actually very good. It's very healthy. Once you notice that again and again, it means that you're noticing what is being covered. It's really like, it's like somebody discovering gold ore, not completely refined, Of course, anyone mining gold would love it if all the gold came in jewelry and in, what do you call it, ingots with the Swiss stamp on it. That would be lovely. But that is not going to happen to most of us instantaneously. If it did happen like that, we should actually question it. We should think, did it really? Did Switzerland really bury the gold so that I could find it with their seal on it? If you really believe that, I hope you have a really, really great teacher who can sort of put you out of that particular deluded positions. So if you notice the other two, it's actually very, very good. This is actually very encouraging. So our part should be to appreciate recognizing actually pure perception. If you can see your own emotions and realize that underneath that is the real awakening, enlightened qualities, hidden underneath it. For example, somebody who is really good at mining gold, discovering gold, when they see a gold or something that resembles that, right away they will know it is gold. And they will have no doubt, they will have the same kind of confidence and excitement. This is what we need to have. Pure perception is not in the way we usually think. Usually we think pure perception is everything beautiful, romantic, nice. Pure perception just literally means direct perception of things as they are. So if you see gold or diamond mixed up or hidden under a pile of shit, you should be really happy. This is what I can say to you. Because other thing is that if I can remind myself of the enlightened nature, if you have received specific instructions on how to do it all the time, then by all means don't listen to what I've said. Just do that. But if that is not something that is clear, then please don't feel depressed or anything else, because you have actually found where all of this is actually covered up. You have found pile of gold hidden in some shit. And that is actually very, very good news. So actually, whenever you can, think of your teacher, think of your, if I may use this term, authentic guru. Think of that teacher and think of his kindness. Not kindness in did he give me a smile or did he or she give me some present or anything like that, because those kindnesses are short-lived. What is the real kindness of our teacher is someone that has shown us how to go through our deluded bristles of the forest of our emotions. Someone who has shown us that. That kind of kindness is really important to appreciate. That kind of kindness is something that we can really feel is genuine. They're not getting anything for it. By telling us how to be free from samsara, what are they actually getting from it? And by showing us that, what am I getting from it? I'm getting actually more than the entire universe for that. So for that, having some gratitude is a natural, organic thing to happen. If it doesn't happen naturally, then we need to train ourselves to be less pompous, less, what can we say, guarded, and less and more open to that kind of kindness. If we have that appreciation for the instructions of our teacher, can we dissociate the teacher from that instruction? If you can, great, do that. If you can't, then you have no other option but to appreciate both of them. Now, we can pretend to do that, but then we're just deluding ourselves. So, the instructions, the authentic, compassionate wisdom instructions that can free us not only from anything outside, but from our most, deepest, intimate bristles and thorns that we are stuck in. Someone that can free us from that. Some teacher that has freed us from that. If you have that appreciation to that, that is called devotion. That is called, I suppose from the Buddhist point of view, we would call it tepa. Again, the word devotion, or sometimes translated as faith, is the best that we can do with the language we have. But there's three parts to it. First one is called inspired faith. Often we translate it as that. But Tangwa, it's like it creates some clarity in our minds. When we think, for example, if you hear the teachings, whether it is on the nature of samsara, nature of the path, etc., it creates some clarity. It removes some of the fogginess, some of the mist in our world, where our mind feels clear and open, less suspicious, less paranoid, because actually we know this is how things work. Just like somebody who's, for example, not very well, and the doctor explains to them, no, this is what's happening. Well, then we feel a certain kind of settling. That's really what we call Tangwe Tepa in Tibetan, often translated as inspired faith. Then, through that, usually there is, I think we can say it in any order we want. The next part is called, I would call it Yichepe Tepa, devotion based on confidence. But here, it's not like the usual confidence of a confident person, but you see that there's no reason to feel paranoid about anything because it is so clear. Like if you're going into a restaurant, you buy a whole lot of food, and then you're not so sure that they've given you the right bill, and you look at it and it actually fits with everything there. Well, then you're confident. You're sure that you're not being taken for a ride. This path is not taking me for a ride, but actually it's taking me beyond. And not only that, who is connected to it has that compassion to give me something so precious. Then you will have Ndöpetepa, faith based on desire. Then you will actually think, oh, this is possible for me. I can do this. So these three kinds of faith all combined together, if we can connect with the teacher, thinking of our teacher, not just our teacher as a human form, but the teacher's teachings, which is inseparable from the teacher's realization. If we can think of our teacher in that sense and not be constantly worried about our usual habits and usual, am I smelling? Am I not? Is this right? That not? If we can do that again and again, then I think it is akin to being awakened and reminded to being awakened. That's why we're told to actually always have the teacher in our mind. But it is not in a romantic sense or anything like that. It is just that we are connecting our outer teacher with the inner teacher, our own mind, our own, what can we say, the deepest part of our mind, connecting that with the teacher. So this is all I can say for that.
Rinpoche, this has been such a wonderful wonderful opportunity to hear your teachings, and also knowing that there's probably many people from the Tergar community, and I imagine there's many of your students all joined together here. It feels like a little bit of a meeting of the Sanghas as well as many people who might be meeting you and encountering Tergar for the first time. So I just want to thank you for taking time out of your life and your teachings. It really means so much to us, and it's just been incredibly inspiring to hear your teachings and to hear everything about your teachers as well. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. It really
Thank
means
you
a
to
lot.
everyone for giving me this opportunity. And thank you also, especially to Mingyur Rinpoche for allowing us to be part of his activity. Thank you
And I
very
know,
much to everyone.
yeah, I know Mingyur Rinpoche would want to thank you on his behalf and on behalf of the whole Tergar community. So please come back and teach us again. We really appreciate it, Rinpoche.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you, Court. So before everyone goes, Rinpoche, you're welcome to go now, but I'm just going to give everyone a bit of an update about what's coming up in the Tergar community over the next few months. So this event with Rinpoche is part of Tergar's Blueprint of Awakening, which is a year-long transmission, and it's focusing on the core principles of Vajrayana Buddhism. So if you'd like to go deeper into the practice of pure perception with the Tergar International community, we invite you to join our main course. So the Blueprints of Awakening Immersion starts in November the 1st. And in it, we'll be exploring the 3 ways of relating to emotions, the 5 wisdom energies and Buddha families, the Guru principle, pure perception, and self-liberation. Next slide, please, Jiva. So the immersion course includes, and you can see that on your screen, so there'll be new videos from Mingyur Rinpoche, guided meditations and practices. There'll be video introductions and reflections from our Tergar guides, as well as live webinars with Mingyur Rinpoche and Khenpo Kunga. And then also weekly live sessions. One of the sessions will be including Cortland Dahl, who you've seen now in his Dharma Geek sessions. Next slide, please, Shiva. So as you can see, this is the timeline of our transmission, and the immersion goes from November to July next year, 2026. So we've got 2 more retreats next year. In February, Khenpo Kunga and Tergar guides are going to be focusing on how to work with the Guru principle. And then in May, Mingyur Rinpoche is going to be looking at pure perception and self-liberation. So the registration's not open for this yet, but you can mark it in your calendar. Next slide, please. So all these courses in this transmissions are included in the Vajrayana online membership. So if you're not yet a member, you can join now, and you can have a free 10-day trial period with access to more than 25 courses, weekly live sessions, and over 200 guided meditations to support your practice. So you'll find a link now in the YouTube chat, and we really look forward to studying and practicing with you on this transmission through the year. So next slide, please, Jiva. So there's a couple of other quick highlights, exciting things in our calendar this year. So in November, Mingyur Rinpoche is going to be leading 2 retreats, and these are going to be streamed live from Tergar Osalling in Kathmandu, Nepal, and you can join either in person or online. And the first retreat, Rinpoche will be continuing the teachings on the cycle of Dorje Drolo, so the wrathful 8th manifestation of Guru Rinpoche. This cycle of teachings belongs to Dzogchen, particularly potent for these challenging times we're in right now. And then the second year of this cycle, Rinpoche will transmit the union of the development and completion stages practices of Dorje Drolo, and there'll be instructions on the copper tube sadhana. So this retreat has prerequisites, and you'll find details on the event page for that. Next and final slide. So That's it, yeah. The second retreat is a collaborative event with Tergar Institute, where Mingyur Rinpoche, along with Tergar Lamas and guides, will explore 3 ways of relating to emotions. And what makes this retreat unique in its approach is focusing on real life application. So you'll learn 3 powerful approaches to deal with any emotion. And you can find the link to the registration page in the chat now. And that's it for us. And thank you again for everyone for being here. It was really nice. And like Court said, I know there's a kind of mixture of Tergar community and Rinpoche's community. And it's been really lovely to share this time with you all. And we look forward to being with you at another retreat or event somewhere sometime. So thank you all for coming. And thank you all for my colleagues and translators who've been working in the background on Zoom and in YouTube. And thank you all. Take care.